Perfect. We are live. Thank you to those of you who are joining us in the Zoom room, and also to those watching via our YouTube stream. If you have any questions for today, please do use the chat in either forum. We'll keep an eye out for those.
I think we might have lost James, and he should be back on soon.
Sorry, when I imagine recording is also stopped. Okay, it's fine. Thanks.
Yeah, it's back on. Thanks, Esan.
James, you're mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Slight issue there, just it closed off quickly, but we are back on live. So again, to start again, thank you very much to those watching in the Zoom feeds. It's great to have you here with us today. For those watching on the live stream via YouTube, thank you very much for joining us there as well. We will keep an eye on questions in both forums. We are very, very excited to have four leaders of the industry who will be joining us today. All very exciting, all innovators, all people working on sustainability issues as well. So just to kind of recap for those just joining us, welcome to the YP Congress. This is the final of our bootcamp session series, in which we have been doing training. We've been hearing from the section officers out there. We've been hearing from everybody, really, section officers about the various activities they're running. We've been hearing from our Young Member Engagement Committee about their perception of the industry and how things are changing, both within the industry and SPE, which have been some really exciting debates. And I'm very happy to say that this will be continuing for today. So I will just share my screen briefly with you. We'll start from the beginning. So hopefully you can see this now. Is this okay, Ian?
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent, thank you. So as you can see, we have our four leaders for today. As I say, all of them working in quite unique fields and very relevant fields for discussions going on at the moment. We're going to be talking to them about their advice to YPs, both joining the industry and already in the industry, about how they can prepare. So we'll be going through a few career-related topics, and I'm sure we'll be, as with all of our sessions this week, we'll be touching on a lot of sustainability topics as well. So before we get started, I do want to say once again, thank you to our sponsors, Shell, who have been supporting the whole YP Congress. We had a really good discussion with them, and they are really kind of passionate about supporting our young members who are very much getting engaged with how the industry is changing and making those changes happen. So a big thank you to them. If you don't know much about the YP Congress, if this is your first session with us, as I say, we have been going for pretty much a week. Starting from Saturday, we had our kickoff meeting where we were discussing, we had some great updates from our current and former SP presidents. And that is where we kicked off our Ideathon, where we have grouped YPs together from all over the world. And they are, as we speak, working on some sustainability issues. And they will be presenting their pitches tomorrow. So we hope you can join us for that. And we also have a sustainability panel session that will be going on at the same time. So we have 5-minute pitches from each of our teams, So you can watch those and you can watch the sustainability panel. As with all of our sessions throughout the week, we are connected to the SPE website via our event page, and you can watch all of our YouTube streams directly from there, whether you're watching live or you want to go back and watch on demand. And it will be exactly the same with these sessions as well. So they will stay online for a long time to come. We've had such an action-packed week. We've covered so many different topics. So I'm sure many of you will be going back and enjoying those. I do very much recommend it. But with such a important panel with us today, I will get into it. So first of all, I am happy to join. Oh, sorry. Here we go, Professor Martin Blunt, Professor and Researcher at the Imperial College London. Professor Blunt is a professor in flow porous media. His research interests are in understanding multi-phase flow, transport, and reaction in porous materials with a wide range of applications, including carbon dioxide storage. He performs experimental, theoretical, and numerical research with a particular emphasis on using high-resolution three-dimensional X-ray imaging to study flow processes in porous media. He is editor-in-chief of the journal Transport in Porous Media and has over 300 scientific publications. He's also very active with SPE as well. So thank you very much for joining us here today. Next up, we have Brian Sullivan, Executive Director at Pika. Pika, a really great company, which is an industry association helping advancing environmental and social performance within the industry. Really great job they're doing. Brian joined IPICA as the Executive Director in 2011. Following his 23-year career in BP, he graduated in metallurgy and material science from Imperial College London and was recruited into BP's Refining and Marketing International Graduate Programme in 1986. Over the course of 23 years, his career included assignments in London, Copenhagen, Budapest, Athens, and Johannesburg, and business experience in over 60 countries. During his time with BP, he has had a varied career, technical, commercial, financial, and leadership roles across the downstream value chain, including crude products and trading marine fuels. Thank you so much. Sorry. Screen is going. We also have Stefan Germain, President at GH Stat. Stefan Germain is the founder and chief executive officer of GH Stat. If you don't know that company, they are fantastic. They provide much of the data on satellites where they are monitoring greenhouse emissions. So really important work that they're doing. And the technology provides actionable greenhouse gas emissions data and insights to various industry. Stefan founded GHG Stat in 2011 to answer a market need for consistent, high-quality measurements of greenhouse gas emissions from industrial facilities worldwide. Mr. Germain has been passionate about applying space technology for the good of Earth for over 25 years, and they are doing fantastic work. We will also be joined in this session by Audrey as well, President of Questor. Audrey can't make it with us right at the beginning of the session, but she will be joining us as soon as she can. So hopefully we will be joined with her soon. Audrey has worked in energy for more than 35 years with Gulf Canada Resources Limited and Questor Technology Incorporated. She holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the University of Toronto and a master's degree in petroleum engineering from the University of Calgary. She is a fellow of the Canadian American Academy of Engineers. Audrey served as a distinguished lecturer with the Petroleum SPE, I should know that, in 2010 and 11. And she is a member of the Schlage Industry Engineering Advisory Council and currently chairs the Canadian Federal Government Clean Technology Strategy Table. As she wasn't able to make it for the beginning of the session, she has provided this link here. She does talk a lot about the future of the industry and how young people can prepare for that in this presentation. It's about an hour long, so we won't be playing it here during this session, but I do recommend watching that when you get the chance. So we'll include that link in the chat so you can visit that when you can. So thank you so much for that. So a lot of amazing work that you guys are all doing. As I say, we are focused on the future of the industry and your advice to IPs. So I might start with you, Brian, as you have your screen on. Would you be able to tell us a bit more about your journey to get to where you are and how you found your journey?
Yes, thanks. Thanks a lot. So, yeah, see, it's obviously been quite a long journey, which doesn't feel as though it has been because of the industry that we work in, which is a very exciting sector to be part of. So, yeah, I left Imperial College with a numeric degree, and a numeric degree, most engineers will have numeric degrees, which actually open up a very broad range of career opportunities afterwards. And yes, I joined BP, and I want to focus a little bit on what the attraction was of joining BP back in the mid 80s, which is a long time ago, of course, but the attraction was it was an international company which had international opportunities to move around, and a fascinating industry. The history of the oil and gas industry at that point, its involvement in geopolitics, the massive, really, really cool engineering that has been sort of the foundation of the whole industry ever since. Were all attractive, were all attractions to me as a sort of a technical graduate. And then, of course, BP is a large company, had a great graduate recruitment program and development program, lots of training, good assignments, that sort of thing. And also one of the things that you might pick up from the industry, or I think particularly in the oil and gas industry, is even then it was more of a meritocracy rather than an exclusive club. And so people from all backgrounds could join the companies like BP, Shell, ExxonMobil, and all that, and progress based on performance and ability. And that was very important to me. And so you've heard of it in the introduction about the experience I've had over 23 years with BP, but yeah, it gave me a very broad array of experiences. I started off in a technical job. My final job was as a CEO of an alternative energy business. In fact, it was an access to energy business looking at trying to provide clean cooking solutions for people at the bottom of the socioeconomic pyramid in South Africa. And so somewhere in that journey from a very technical role at the beginning through to this sort of access to energy role in the end, an awful lot of different experiences came along, and that comes about because it was a company of the size of BP with the geographic coverage and also the broad spectrum of activities it gets involved in. So I stayed there a long time, and but then it was time to move on, and so I joined IPICA, and IPICA is an industry association. So our members are all leading oil and gas companies around the world. We account for pretty much half the world's oil and gas production as part of the association, and we focus on sustainability issues. So we work to improve the industry's performance on climate change, biodiversity, human rights, the relationship between the industry and sustainable development, and topics like that. And the industry, we convene the members to work together in working groups and task forces to share knowledge, develop good practice. And then we're also in a non-lobby capacity, and I'm underlining that one because it's very important. We're responsible for the relationship between the industry and the United Nations on big topics like climate change, for example. So we have observer status at the UN, and we participate in the Business and Industry Major Group, which is one of the 9 major groups of the UN, that they sit at the back of the room behind all the countries when there are big UN meetings like the one that's currently going on in Glasgow. And so IPICA is in a rather interesting place because we're at the interface between the industry, a fascinating industry, and the biggest challenges facing the planet. And these challenges are challenges that aren't just for ecologists or climate scientists. These are challenges which are going to involve engineering in order to solve them at large scale. So you might see where I'm going with this, but I view this as being part of the challenge and potential attraction for engineers in the industry in the years to come, given the transformation that has to happen in the industry as part of the energy transition going forward. So it's an interesting place to be. We also get very involved with SPE, and so there are various technical sections. There's a sustainable development technical section that we do a lot of work with, and also the fabulous SPE Gaia movement. And I am aware that Gaia, I think, is one of the supporters of this particular event. Mm-hmm. And I'd encourage anyone with an interest in sustainability to check out Gaia and get involved, because it's a great opportunity. Even if you might not think that your day job covers sustainability, you can participate in that as an individual and build your knowledge, your skills, your network in this particular area, because one thing's for sure, everybody's day job involves sustainability in some way, and this is a great way to broaden. Did you want me to talk about what's the same or what's different between when I started and what's now, or do you want to come to that later?
Yeah, sure. We can run through that now.
Okay, so yeah, I say the key thing that's the same is a lot of the attractions to the industry. So all those things, the international opportunities, the industry's history, the involvement in geopolitics, the engineering involved, usually the career management and support that you would get in the industry, and the sort of the meritocracy element of it, I think they're all still there as an industry. Obviously, there are some things which are different, and some things are different in a good way as well, because I think the industry has made a lot of progress. It still has work to do, but has made a lot of progress in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of the bigger industry associations are helping to convene the industry to actually progress it even further in the coming years. So I'd say that was a great thing. However, of course, on the downside, the industry has always had activists that are not its biggest fans, and the issues were different when I started in BP. In fact, if I remember rightly, it was anti-apartheid activists were, and of course the concerns about oil spills and things like that were key drivers. And there is activism happening now, and there's probably more activism happening now. But it's something that we have to engage with as an industry, and I think the industry is getting slightly better at engaging with people it disagrees with or who disagree with it. And of course, the role of the industry is changing. It's not just about providing energy, it's about looking at energy in its holistic sense, looking at carbon in a holistic sense. So, a lot of companies now are either moving into describing themselves as energy companies because they're diversifying to different energy sources, or they're becoming carbon management companies. So particularly those companies who don't want to go into, or don't really want to go into renewables technology themselves, they're actually looking at how they manage the carbon cycle that they are involved in, right from production through to, for example, putting it back in the ground through things like carbon capture, use and storage. So I would, so I'll just pause there and see whether I wanted to give someone else a go.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, that's very insightful. Thank you so much. Martin, I will go to you next, if that's okay. So the same as Brian, what's led you to this exciting part of your career? And once you've described that again, if you could explain what you think is the same and what's different for those entering the industry now.
Right, so yeah, I mean, there are actually some similarities with Brian. I didn't start at Imperial, but I've ended there. My background is actually in physics, and I did a PhD in physics at Cambridge. And then what disillusioned me, funny enough, with academia was it was always solutions looking for a problem. Right? I was working on fractals and fluid flow in the sort of heyday of that particular subject. And then, so I wanted to work on real problems. I wanted to solve problems. And really the options, funnily enough, you know, in the late 80s for physicists were working on nuclear, either nuclear bombs or nuclear power. And this was post-Chernobyl. So this was actually a big environmental concern. There was working in sort of consultancy, and most of that consultancy was actually rather military. So, you know, designing better ways of killing civilians, which again, didn't appeal to me. So funnily enough, working in the oil industry, and indeed my first job was at BP, seemed almost the moral choice, right? You were working in an industry that was providing energy for the world, playing a part in unprecedented levels of prosperity globally. I was then, after 4 years working BP as a reservoir engineer, I got my dream job, which was to work at Stanford University. And what convinced me to stay in academia was teaching. I really enjoyed the interaction with students. And I feel, you know, it's been a privilege for me over the last 25 years to have educated a generation of students in petroleum engineering. You know, I can walk into an office of an oil company anywhere in the world, and I'm likely to bump into one of my former students. And I think that's one of the sort of blessings or privileges of being a professor. So I worked at Stanford in their, what was then called their Department of Petroleum Engineering for 7 years. And then I moved to Imperial 21 years ago. And I've stayed there ever since. I started life as a professor of petroleum engineering, and we have recently renamed ourselves. So now I'm a professor of flow and porous media that more properly describes my sort of academic discipline. So I now want to, you know, talk a little bit about, you know, the future of the industry and maybe put some of these points a little bit more strongly. I mean, Imperial College has, in fact, just yesterday published a document on its sustainable or socially responsible investment and research strategy. And that strategy basically says that both in terms of the investment in our endowment, but more strictly in terms of teaching and research, our research activity should be consistent with the Paris climate goals, or indeed very soon probably called the Glasgow climate goals as COP comes to its conclusion, to be net zero by 2050. So we will only engage in companies that have genuine plans, not just they say it on a website, but genuinely measurable, quantifiable plans to be net zero in their operations by 2050. And our research should also be consistent with that. So that actually has some relatively harsh realities, but also some opportunities. So it's, you know, just part of a sort of warning to the industry that they do have to embrace being net zero in a really very serious fashion. But it opens up enormous engineering opportunities. So I agree with Brian, actually. I think fundamentally, providing energy and avoiding dangerous climate change is a scientific and engineering challenge. It's actually not fundamentally a moral issue, it's a technological issue. And so my advice to young professionals is there's nothing wrong with the oil industry. It continues to provide an absolutely essential component of our modern lifestyle, but it's going to change. And don't be worried about that change. If you work for Google, if you work for Amazon, right? If you were Elon Musk and you said, well, in 30 years' time, you've got to sort of transform what you're doing in your business, they'd laugh. 30 years, they're going to change their business in 3 years. So what I advise people to do is to concentrate on those skills that are transferable. So skills, for instance, in subsurface geoscience and engineering, We may move to a situation where extracting less oil, but we're certainly going to be putting CO2 underground. We're certainly going to be maybe storing hydrogen in the subsurface. What about thermal energy storage? What about geothermal energy? What about looking at all sorts of other problems? So my advice is to be skilled in the things that are transferable. So that's one of the things, actually, I think I benefited from my education in physics. You know, it gave me the maths. It gave me the concepts in physical science, and I also learned coding. Right? So I agree now I'm a bit of a fossil when it comes to writing code. But when we educate our students at Imperial, those are the skills that we emphasize. So we continue to teach earth sciences. We continue to have students who are working in the oil industry, but we are emphasizing those transferable skills. Geoscience, understanding the planet beneath our feet, is extremely important. Understanding fluid flow, which is my area, is always going to be important. But then other skills in terms of mathematics, physical science, and computational and data science. These are the new things. This is really where I would say you should concentrate your educational further development. And then you have the toolkit for the amazing challenge ahead of us. And it's a challenge actually we should embrace with enthusiasm, to continue to provide energy to the planet, to continue to increase prosperity globally while dealing with the challenge of dangerous climate change. Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I found that really fascinating, particularly your reasons for coming into the industry, because many people who we've been talking to the past week are still saying the same thing. Like this, they want to boost their local communities. They want to kind of raise the infrastructure. They want to kind of raise living standards, and it's great to hear that was the case for you as well. Stefan, if you would like to tell us a bit about your journey coming into such a highly technical and specialist field. It's very exciting, modern field. Yes, please tell us how you got to where you are, and the same. I mean, it must be a lot of changes from when you joined the industry to now, because the industry is changing so fast. But it would be lovely to hear from you. Sure.
Well, I think I'm going to come at this from a slightly different perspective than the last two speakers, but because I'm not actually directly in the petroleum industry, I'm really in at the periphery of the industry, but I am helping address the transition that the industry needs to make over the coming years and probably decades. I am a firm believer that the energy sector is a critical part, and the oil and gas sector is a critical part of the energy mix that we're going to have for many years to come. And really, it's about how we do that in a sustainable way. So my path is, because I'm coming at this a little differently, you might think I have a different background, but actually it sounds like I'm similar in some ways to some of the other previous speakers. I'm an engineer by training. My background is in physics and engineering physics. And I did that primarily as a way to have a generalist kind of background that allowed me to address many different skills that would be needed to set me on a path to working in space, which was what I was always interested in. And I always had a bent in working in space that I wanted to, quote unquote, bring space down to Earth, where I wanted to bring the technology that's available in space and apply it to advancing our needs as the human race down on the planet. And so the natural intersection there was to work on the environment, which was another passion of mine that I've had for a few decades. And that's really how GHGSat came together. And for those of you who don't know us, GHGSat has 3 satellites in orbit right now. We're about to launch another 8 in the next 2 years. We have 3 launching next summer and another 6 launching in 2023. And those satellites are all designed to detect emissions of methane, and one of those coming up will be for carbon dioxide from individual facilities. So they're designed so that we can see a leak from an oil well, from a compressor station, from a blowdown of a section of pipe, from from whatever source of methane and eventually for carbon dioxide that may exist around anywhere in the world. So again, I'm a bit of the periphery of the industry, so I can't speak to the changes that have happened in the industry itself. But I'm the same underlying trends that have led to where I am in founding GHGSat and having satellites buzzing around the Earth, monitoring the planet, have also affected the petroleum industry. And so, changes in technology, miniaturization, the acceleration of both of those, the incredible things that are happening with sensors now, how we can use all parts of the electromagnetic spectrum to sense underground, above ground, in space, lead to whole new ways of seeing in the world. And I routinely freak people out when I talk to people about what we do, because I explain to them that right now, the whole planet every day is being monitored from space. And so there's companies that are taking pictures of every square meter of the surface of the Earth every day. And that's in the visible spectrum. But there are also companies like ours that are taking hyperspectral measurements of the surface of the Earth every day. So like it or not, the whole planet is being monitored. And that contributes to what has been, I've heard, called the digital oil field initiatives around the industry. And I think the kind of trends in the acceleration of technology and miniaturization of technology that applied to space have equally applied to the petroleum industry. So maybe I can address a few points that I can talk about an hour later, but about what we look for in
yes,
people.
Yes, please do. Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Sure. So as an employer, we look for obviously the basics, which is education and quality of education. And we look also for skills over and above the basic education. And that's probably the single biggest thing that's changed since I graduated. I often joke that I never would have gotten hired at my own company because the basic degree isn't good enough. And that's what I graduated with. And then I kind of learned the rest on the job. And now the people who are competing for jobs bring a lot more to the table. They bring extracurriculars, they bring side projects, they bring examples of code that they've done and projects they've done, games that they've built. That just astounds me every time I see new graduates and the range of skills they bring to bear. So it's not just the education, it's also the skills. But I'll also emphasize that we look very much for the ability to work in teams. So you might be the most brilliant person on the planet, but if you can't work with others, that's going to be a serious mitigating factor for us. So when we think about how I see jobs changing in the industry in the next 10 years, I think I'm going to quote what one of the previous speakers said, because I thought it was bang on, is that everybody's day job involves sustainability. And I think that's only going to change even more. So that's going to be even more true over the next 10 years. The industry needs a massive culture change. I think that the senior management levels understand that there needs to be a transition. I think the young professionals entering the industry are open to that kind of change, but there's a whole hundreds of thousands of people in the middle ranks of the industry that are in a somewhat ossified, hierarchical, slow changing, this is the way we've always done it kind of mindset that the young people have to, you're the ones who are going to change that as you progress in your careers. So, I strongly believe in working inside the tent to work with industry to drive change. And that's your job. This is exactly the opportunity you have in front of you. Bring that change to the industry together collaboratively with the industry. The world needs the industry, but it needs to be done in a sustainable way. And I think there's just so many things that can be done in the short term to make the industry far more sustainable that this audience can bring to bear in the near term.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Really, really great answers. Thank you. Really exciting to hear about all these. Everything that you said has matched perfectly with the experiences our young professionals has been talking about the past week, about the kind of not just it's no longer just nice to have these additional skills. It's becoming kind of expected. People are having to kind of come together with all of this, at least understanding of the wider field. So thank you so much. That's really, really, really good to hear. Martin, I'll come to you next. I guess it's slightly different for you working with students in academia. But is there anything you look for in students? Do you think see any qualities in the students and think this person's gonna make it far?
It's always, I mean, we're here to educate, not I won't say sort of put labels on students, but what we are looking for, and I absolutely agree with Stefan here, is we're looking for students who can work in teams. So in our education, we always have teamwork, and that is quite interesting. You have bright students who can work on their own, but they just do their little piece. And you have other students who bring the whole team up. And that's a very important skill. I'd also agree with this comment about middle management. I think the transformation in the industry is understood at director level, and it's understood by the young people we're talking to today. But the oil industry in particular values expertise that is measured in, length of service. And that, isn't wrong when you're operating oil fields, but is a little bit of a difficulty when you need to transform your business. So for young people, I would advise you to be, don't be shy, be bold. Right? When you enter a company, don't just, some grey-haired guy comes along and slams on the desk and says, well, we've been doing this for the last 30 years. Again, imagine you worked at Google, right? If someone said we've been doing this well, again, that's a statement that wouldn't happen. So you need to be able to work in teams. You need to be able to bring up the level of other people. Very important. But you should also be bold in challenging what other people are doing. Just because they have more experience doesn't mean to say that they're adapted for the rapid change that's going to happen to the industry.
Thank you so much, Martin. And again, I'll go to Brian. Again, obviously, this is a slightly different question for you because you're working with other associations. But again, are there particular traits or skills where you think these people are going to help push the industry forward or anything like that?
Yeah, so I guess there's I've got a sort of two sort of perspectives. One is as someone who hires people straight out of university to work in my team. It's a very small team, but there's that one. And the second is looking at professionals who are working or getting more and more involved in work in support of sustainability across the industry. So in that particular area, we see, we have from our members, there are something like 2,500 subject matter experts across the industry who access our who work through our sort of SharePoint site and share our resources and work together. And I think probably one of the main things that I noticed most is the collaboration across the company interfaces. So they don't just work within teams within their own companies. They're able to work with people who work for other companies or suppliers or customers. It's not the usual, the walls that it used to exist between competitors in this particular area are coming down. The walls between external stakeholders and also and companies are sort of more porous than they used to be. And so that ability to work and form innovative partnerships is very important, and the ability to do that and the ability to be open to do that is crucial. So we're starting to see some really interesting very progressive partnerships happening between companies and NGOs. And these NGOs, you know, in the past, in my time, they might have had a squad of people parked outside the office, smearing oil all over themselves, complaining. Whereas now the relationship's different, working together to solve specific problems. And so that ability to be open to new and innovative teamwork across the interfaces is something that we see a lot more of. And other bits of evidence we see from that are, particularly, you know, from YPs and students, is actually getting involved in topics which are not core to the sort of fundamentals of a degree or their particular work experience, but doing that, getting involved in professional societies like SPE or the Institute of Mechanical Engineers or people like that, or the Energy Institute, and so yeah, getting involved in side projects or other pieces of work where they're looking to sort of share knowledge and increase the knowledge and understanding on particular issues, particularly sustainability issues, as sort of an extracurricular sort of activity. So seeing that sort of additional enriching work going on alongside the day job is also a big thing. So looking at it as an employer, we look for people who align with our values. So, you know, our role as an association is to help the industry advance its environmental and social performance in support of the energy transition and in support of sustainable development. And the biggest thing we look for, you know, CV will show, particularly from a you know, a graduate or master's graduate, we'll see, yeah, what they've done academically, and we'll see their extracurricular stuff. But what we're looking for is an alignment with the top value that we have, which is enthusiasm, passion for the subject. Because we can, you know, we have in the past hired someone who's been the best academically on paper, and it doesn't really work that well as if we get someone who is maybe not the top academic, but actually has the strongest passion and willingness to sort of work together with people in this particular area. And that's probably the number one thing that we look for when we're selecting.
Excellent. Thank you so much. There seems to be a kind of a common theme running of collaboration and kind of thinking outside of yourself and working well with others and teamwork. So I think these are really valuable skills. So thank you so much for sharing. I'll stay with you, Brian, for a bit when you were talking there. Are there any skills that you think are missing when people are coming to your company? Are you seeing any gaps as people come in?
I think probably so. I'd say probably the thing which I think they find the biggest challenge actually is migrating from a mode of you know, so we produce publications and documents, and there's quite a bit of writing, summarizing, and that goes on in our world. And the main thing I'd say, if I was going to sum up in one word, brevity. So if we're hiring people who just successfully completed the challenge of writing a 20,000 word dissertation, and so sort of almost quantity and length of communication is a sort of key success factor, whereas in sort of the world that we live in the sort of the commercial world that we interface with, you know, brevity and being succinct and concise, getting the key points across, is actually more important. Being able to articulate a point very quickly, so usually probably the biggest challenge we have is actually converting people to and helping people sort of really distill down the essence of the points they need to make. And and I'm now spending quite a long time using too many words in that particular point. Ironic, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Martin, I'm sure you would prefer some papers to be shorter. Are you finding that's a similar issue with students when you're working with them?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, particularly in science, you want to make your point as simply and briefly and clearly as possible. And I think in the modern world, people are very good at doing this, funny enough, orally. So presentations are good. Struggle a bit more to do this in a concise and clear fashion in writing. And again, it's one of these skills: presentation skills, writing skills, and more generally, I would say more mentoring skills. So it goes back to this teamwork. Is there some people who can explain things and teach people and move everyone's level up? And there's some people who just, very much focused on themselves. And these, I agree with Brian. It's the passion, it's the ability to work with others, the desire, the drive to move everyone with you is much more important than simply being top of the class in terms of collecting points during your degree. Mm-hmm. And I think for many young people, particularly those in education, there is often a tendency for people to think that education is a collecting of points and to be very concerned about the percentage or what's on the transcript. Okay, people can tell, the good students and the not so good students academically, but that's not, in fact, what makes the difference between getting a job or not, or having a successful career or not.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Martin. And Stefan as well, are you finding people are lacking in certain skills, or do you think, people think that they know it all already?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I was looking at my notes as Martin and Brian were speaking, and then certainly one of the things that we all value is the energy, is the fire in the belly, is the desire to make a difference and have an impact, and to try to drive change in large middle management type of organizations. However, one thing that I would say is a little missing is some patience, for lack of a better word. And that it's funny how you'd think those two are diametrically opposed, but there's no substitute for experience. And there are things you're going to learn about working with teams, about working with difficult people, about working with great people, about teams that work well, teams that don't work well, trying a technology and failing. You learn a lot from failing. Trying a technology and succeeding, you learn a lot. It's a lot more fun. But that experience, it takes time. So have the fire in the belly, have the desire to change the world, enjoy and be passionate about what you do, but it's okay to pace that out. And also, by the way, patience comes with personal lifestyle and personal life balance. We don't want people to work more than 40 hours a week. We want people to have their life and have a full life on the side, or should say the other way around, have a full life and work on the side. Right? So, and you have to be able to balance the two. So that with that comes patience as well. I mean, if you can't have insatiable fire in the belly and demand to have promotion tomorrow all the time. So patience.
Thank you so much. It sounds like such an obvious thing, doesn't it? That experience takes time, but I think a lot of people forget that. It's such a beautiful saying. Thank you so much. I'm aware I want to leave as much time as I can for some questions at the end. So do submit your questions in the chat, and we'll come to that shortly. But I'll go to Brian next. I'll just ask you, I'm not sure, you can spend as much time on this as well. I know you've been heavily involved in this, but how do you see jobs in the industry changing in the next 10 years? It's my question. I know you've done a huge amount of work on how the industry is changing, so it would be fantastic to hear from you on that.
Yeah, I think I guess there will be increasing effort put on or an increasing percentage of jobs will be focused on improving particularly the carbon footprint of oil and gas operations. I mean, I think one of the challenges we face in the energy transition is actually going to take quite a long time. So yes, it's not going fast enough, but there are some fundamental realities that, in terms of how hardwired the world's energy system is, that will mean that oil and gas for most of the industry, well, even the companies who have said that they are going to be producing less oil and gas, like BP, for example, they will still be big oil and gas producers in the next 10 years. And so I think it wouldn't be wise to think, okay, oil and gas is done, there's no career path or anything like that, because that's simply not going to be the case. So I think there's still going to be quite a lot of traditional oil and gas roles. They may well shift location as the emphasis on production moves around the world. That has always been the case in the industry as fields decline and new fields emerge. So that mobility is still going to be needed. But yes, there will be increasing emphasis on engineering solutions that improve energy efficiency or reduce methane emissions. GHG-SAT, for example, is a great technology which helps locate them, and so once located, they've got to be dealt with. And so there's going to be a lot of work in that particular area. And there's already a lot going on in the industry to reduce methane emissions, but there's still more to do. And so a lot of the fundamental engineering work is still going to be going on. But then also, I think there's a lot of we're seeing the start of growth in the carbon capture and storage sector. So in the UK, we've seen the approval of the two hubs in recent weeks. If you think about how big the global carbon capture and storage industry needs to be in order to catch all the carbon that could be viably done in this particular effort, that is huge. There's a huge amount of engineering required in order to implement and scale up that technology. So yeah, there'll be a lot of opportunity in that particular area as well. And just one point I wanted to make before, and it's a bit further afield than that, but I think the point to make is even in the most conservative scenario I've seen, which is the International Energy Agency's net 1.5 degree scenario that they published recently, which is a very, very conservative scenario when it comes to the total size of the oil and gas market. It's still going to be anything between a $600 billion and a $1 trillion industry. That's quite big. So I think it's worth bearing in mind that the need for oil and gas, even in a world that achieves 1.5 degrees, there is still going to be a substantial career path in that particular area.
Thank you so much, Brian. Martin, you're at the forefront of research and watching all your amazing students develop their projects for the future. How do you see the industry changing in 10 years?
Oh, I think the change is going to be very significant and very substantial. And I entirely agree. We're going to continue to be producing oil and gas, right? And that goes without saying. Our economy will collapse within a week without it. We've seen in Britain, the slight whiff of a suggestion that there will be limits on petrol supplies. And immediately there was panic, high gas prices at the moment. However, the industry does need to transform, and it can transform in two ways. One is through carbon capture and storage. So basically, for every molecule of CO2 that is generated from oil field operations and when the products are burned, a molecule of CO2 goes back underground. That's net zero, right? And oil companies need to embrace that really seriously. The second is using the enormous profits from the oil industry. I mean, the oil price now is quite high. Your oil companies are generating tens of billions of dollars every year to invest this in another business that is sustainable, right? It can be renewables, it could be hydrogen infrastructure, you name it. And any other company, you know, if you were to talk to the top entrepreneurs in the world and say, I'm going to give you $30 billion a year and you've got 30 years to develop another profitable business, again, you know, this is something we can do. So I think it's very interesting times for the industry. The industry does have to transform, and really quite fundamentally, really has to address the carbon problem in a real way. And the excitement for young professionals is you're going to be part of that. So it's not, you know, fossil fuels, you know, it sounds, you know, it's a bad word. But for young professionals, you're going to be working in an industry that is going to change, completely change in 10 years. And you want to be part of that because the value of the industry is still extremely significant. You want to be part of an industry that is not the problem, but has been part of the solution.
Thank you so much, Martin. And Stefan, obviously we'll only know this change is happening thanks to the work that you're doing and your amazing satellites. How do you see your industry changing in the next 10 years?
Oh boy, I think what I do is going to change 10 times over in the next 10 years. I think the reality of the technology industry is that we reinvent ourselves every 2 to 3 years. And, I think the advances in sensors, I mean, the sensors and the electronics iterate typically every 3 to 5 years. New competitors, geopolitics. I'm not sure if it was Brian and Martin who brought up the geopolitics before, but there's some very complex geopolitics that I think are going to shift slowly, but will shift over the next decade. So bring all that together, and I think it's going to be a really, really exciting time. I would also, by the way, just put in a little plug that what SP is doing right now is very important for the industry going forward, if only because you need to reach out to each other and know each other across geographies, across time zones, across countries, because solving sustainability for oil and gas is going to be a global issue. And the more you rise in positions of influence and responsibility within companies around the world, the more you can work together to make that change happen, which is absolutely going to be required, because it's not just one country that's going to make the change, it's the whole world. So anyway, I applaud you for your effort with SPE, and I would encourage you to continue your efforts to get to know each other across time zones and geographies.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Stefan. We will open it up to questions. So please either raise your hands or have a look at the chat and see if there's anything in there. I will just start us off though, just to give you a bit of time to help with that. But Martin, what I was going to ask you was, we've heard some people across the week who are struggling because they're working on these solutions, they're wanting to be part of the solution, but obviously there's a lot of negative perception from the public and the news. Do you have any advice for those people who want to be part of the solution but without the abuse, I suppose?
Okay, I mean, there are two parts to this. One is what you might describe as fundamental intellectual training, which we've already discussed. Have the engineering basics. The other is, to my mind, often we're too defensive. The industry and people working in the industry sort of keep quiet and hope that that's not a problem. But the reality is, you can see in COP26 talking about essentially many people want the industry simply to close. And so anything you say, seems bad. So you need to actually, get on the front foot with this. to emphasize the value of oil and gas in the current economy and the ability of the industry to change fundamentally, and to explain how you're going to do this. And there are lots and lots of different ways, right? One is carbon capture and storage, I've spoken about. The other is simply to use the profits from producing hydrocarbons into other businesses. And this is appreciated by the people at the very top of the company. And it's something that as a young professional, you need to embrace and understand and be able to articulate. But I would advise people to be challenged. I mean, one of the things that sometimes disappoints me is that people want to withdraw and just, well, I'm sort of working my niche and that's fine. But get yourself challenged. So we've been talking about COP26 in Glasgow. Read the reports. Read the reports in the BBC. I actually deliberately read the reports in The Guardian, which is a very environmentalist newspaper, because I want to be challenged. I'm an academic. I enjoy the challenge. Can I answer these criticisms? What should I be doing? So I actually, in many ways, seek out the people who are most critical, because you need to be able to have an answer to that and to be secure in yourself that you do.
Thank you so much, Martin. Are there any questions from the audience? Unfortunately, Stefan has had to close off at the end of the hour. We are running slightly over, but yes, we'll try and get at least one or two questions in if we can. Thank you. Or not, or we can wrap up on the hour. Everyone's so concise. Nehal, thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for the great panel. So I have one question, actually. Professor Blunt said a lot about carbon capture and storage, and it is really a fundamental technology that will help lots of industries, not just the oil and gas industry. For example, the hard-to-abate industries like Siemens Steel and chemical industry. But then again, we're still being attacked. Like, and in COP26, we were not able to say that we are petroleum engineers. Otherwise, there will be, a protest against us. So, how do you think we can, I would say, market or make people see that we are the main people who do the solutions, like CCS and hydrogen and all these things? So we are part of the solution. We're not the enemy.
Yeah, nice to talk to you. It's definitely a challenge, and it's a difficult challenge, right? Because there is no doubt that the production of CO2 in the atmosphere is changing our climate in a bad way, and obviously that's due to oil and gas production, but oil and gas production has also been fundamental in giving us a standard of living that is completely unprecedented in human history. So I think you need to start really from that perspective, right? And start from the perspective of exactly how important oil and gas is to our lives even today, and to articulate the fact that this is not a moral issue, it's a scientific and engineering challenge. And the skills associated with dealing with that challenge reside in the oil and gas industry, and to work in a company that hopefully embraces that. I mean, the challenge of putting sufficient CO2 underground to avoid climate change will create a business in terms of the volumes of fluid injected that's as big as the current oil and gas industry. And we're going to have to do that. We probably will find ourselves in 2050 extracting CO2 from the atmosphere and putting it underground. And that's an amazing thing for us to do globally. I mean, really quite inspirational. And we are in the industry that will do this. Similarly with hydrogen, how are we going to store energy? How are we going to transport energy in the way that we have done with oil and gas? We're probably going to do it with hydrogen. How are we going to deliver that? How are we going to store it? So there are lots of very positive things. And I think you should address this with robustness, with enthusiasm, right? You shouldn't be defensive. You shouldn't be hiding. You should be proud of what you're doing. I certainly am, and I'm certainly very proud that I have devoted most of my career to training people who work in the international oil industry. And I'm not, although we are changing what we're doing and rightly changing what we're doing, I'm not going to be ashamed of what's happened in the past.
Thank you so much, Professor. I think I speak for everyone at Imperial when we say we are proud to be one of your students. So thank you so much.
Well, I'm certainly proud of you, Nihal. And
Thank you,
indeed, all of my students. Sorry, yeah. I mean, it really is, as I said, that's really a privilege. And I'm not going to look back and say, oh, they were doing bad things. Absolutely not.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Martin. We'll go to two more questions. We'll start off with Rodrigo and then to Nikhil, and then we'll wrap up for today. But thank you. Please go ahead, Rodrigo.
Thanks, James. I don't want to take long, so I leave time for the answers. I just wanted to thank the panelists and, of course, Niha and you guys for setting it up, and Professor Martin and all the lecturers. It's been a while since I hear some insightful comments. I myself, I'm an undergrad in physics, but I've always felt, and as an outsider, that I went into the oil and gas industry and felt always a little bit too transversal. And hearing those words from the panel, from all speakers on trying to make those transversal skills for our best, and the fact that we're closer to the start of the change of the industry rather than the end, that it's quite an optimistic speech, and I really appreciate it, and the honesty and the advice. But with that said, James, I pass on for anyone else that has questions.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. Nikhil, please go ahead.
Thank you all. It was really exciting to hear all of you, and thank you very much for taking out time and speaking to young professionals like us, as well as sharing your thoughts with the global audience. I have two questions. First, I totally agree with what Nihal asked, and thank you, Professor Martin, for what you said. I have two questions. So first is maybe for all the panelists that what happens is oil and gas is blamed. However, if you consider renewable energy or EVs for that matter, because electric vehicles, the biggest mobility change, why everybody is calling it why everybody is calling it as a solution? It's actually not carbon neutral. The amount of carbon that's required for extracting, generating a battery is still very high. So it's not carbon neutral, but still it's not at all blamed, and it's looked upon as a solution, as the future. That's my first question. And my second question is specifically for Professor Martin. When the news came in, so I'm from India, and I'm a petroleum engineer by background. I've been in the industry for 12-13 years. And Imperial College, we always looked upon as one of the premier colleges, leading institutes, guiding the academia, how it transforms. So maybe this is a different question for you, Professor, because it's an opportunity I'm getting and I'm going to grab it. So how did the university arrive to a conclusion that let's discontinue the course and name it something differently? Because that's something that I'm quite curious to understand. And how do you see that the change in the title of the course impacting in coming time? So these are the two questions. Thank you.
Okay, well, let me leap in and address those. So the thing about the course, so with the moment we teach an MSc in petroleum engineering, and we're going to discontinue that, and we're going to have a new MSc that's called Geoenergy with Machine Learning and Data Science, called GEMS. And the reason for that, Nikhil, is actually so that we train our students with an appropriate skill set for the modern job industry. So we've seen a collapse in application numbers and a problem with our students finding employment. And many of the reasons is that they don't have the skills that are adaptable to other subsurface geoscience and engineering problems. They don't learn about carbon capture and storage. They don't learn about geothermal, and they don't have good computational skills. So we're doing it in response to the industry and in response to what we feel is appropriate training. And the feedback from industry, and I include the oil industry in that, has been universally positive. Okay, so it's a genuine change to create the skills that we need for modern young professionals. When it comes to other things, you're absolutely right. I think we need to look at the carbon footprint of all activities, and indeed more generally the environmental footprint, and nothing comes without a cost, right? You can see not just the carbon footprint, but the environmental footprint of lithium mining. And we see this with every new industry. I'm old enough to know that people thought that the likes of Google and Facebook were completely different, and these were much more moral companies and not like, established businesses, right? And now we can see that people are scrutinizing these companies with a rather sharper eye for good reason. And it's the same, the renewable industry, okay, the carbon footprint is lower, but it doesn't come completely without environmental and social consequences. And these need to be addressed robustly, and they will be.
Thank you. Brian, would you like to address that point as well?
Yeah, I guess the challenge that we have, and I think the previous Nihal's question sort of alluded to it as well in terms of experience at COP26, is it's a scientific problem and an engineering challenge, but it's a very emotive issue. One of the challenges that we have is to quite often the facts, the arguments which are thrown at the industry or at people who work in the industry don't bear much scrutiny when it comes to fact. However, they're fully charged when it comes to emotion, and it's actually very difficult to respond or convince organizations which are which have their foundation of their arguments in politics and emotion with facts. There are some activists, organizations out there who just don't want to hear or don't find the facts convenient. So yeah, this is a challenge that we face. I think it's, eventually, my belief is time will tell, and we will show that through emissions reductions that countries achieve because of the success of programs like scaling up CCS or implementation of hydrogen, it will become clear. I mean, some interesting, there's evidence already. If you look at the impact switching from coal to gas as a source of power generation. I think the IEA had a report out a couple of years ago, which basically highlighted that the impact of going from coal to gas for power generation was the equivalent of putting 200 million renewably powered electric vehicles on the road every year since 2010. And compared to the actual number of EVs that are on the road at the moment, which is I think about 5 million I think around about 5 million. So in time the evidence will support it, and the proof points will be there as long as we deliver it. And as long as we deliver it is a big thing. It's very important that we do that. And a lot of companies will need to use their profits from their oil and gas activities in order to finance this growth.
Thank you so much. Excellent points. And again, we've touched on this before. The science will win. The facts will win. We will all struggle with it, I'm sure. But thank you so much. It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Martin and Brian and Stefan. I really, really appreciate your insight. I know everybody watching has really appreciated it as well. And to hear those words from such established people, I think is fantastic. So thank you so much. And I know with so much talk about soft skills and presentation skills and things like that being necessity, I know our colleagues, the Business Management and Leadership Committee at SPE will be very happy to hear that those skills are so in demand. So that's really fantastic news. As we are a bit over. I will close it up there. Thank you so much. It's been a really amazing week of activities. This session has been the perfect way to end it all. So thank you so much for the Ideathon participants who will be showcasing their sustainability solutions. Good luck to you, and we look forward to seeing those tomorrow. But for us at the bootcamp side of things, thank you so much. It's been a really exciting week, and I really look forward to doing it again. So thank you very much, everybody. It's been fantastic. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.